Hi again. Today we're going to talk about division involving zero. We've all been taught the rules for division involving zero, but do we know why they're true? First, let's make sure that we understand what division actually is. It wouldn't be hard for you to tell me that 10 divided by 2 is 5. But if I ask you to justify why 10 divided by 2 is 5, maybe you remember that in elementary school we used the justification using multiplication. So we'd say that we know that 10 divided by 2 is 5 because the answer 5 multiplied by the divisor 2 gives us the numerator back, 10. And that feels convincing that 2 goes into 10 5 times. Now let's look at a situation that's similar but involving the number 0. Let's see what happens when 0 is in the numerator. Try your best to resist conjuring up what you've been told to memorize about this, and let's think about it in a logical way. See if we can figure out what it is from things that make sense. Before, we knew that 10 divided by 2 was 5. But let's pretend that for 0 divided by 2, we just don't know the answer. So temporarily, let's name the answer x. Now, if we follow the format of what we did in the first line, we justified that 10 divided by 2 was 5 by saying that the answer multiplied by the denominator should give us back the numerator. So in this case, if I multiply the answer by the denominator, I can write x times 2, that should give me back the answer 0. Now, since everyone is more comfortable with multiplication than division, think about this statement. What can you multiply 2 by and get 0? If you recall the zero product property, if 2 or more things multiply to give 0, then one of those things must be 0. And since 2 isn't 0, then x has to be 0. And x is what we called the answer to our original problem. So our conclusion is that 0 divided by 2 equals 0. And that should agree with what you learned when you were in school, that when you divide 0 by any non-zero number, the answer is 0. Now, what about if it's the other way around? What if 2 is on the top and we're dividing by 0? Again, resist the urge to say the answer based on what you've been asked to memorize, and let's use the same concept. Suppose that I don't know the answer to this and I call it something. Let's call it y. Then that means that if I multiply the answer y by 0, I'd get 2 back. And let's apply a similar logic to before. What could I multiply by 0 and get 2 back? If you try to find such a number, you might realize that there is no such number, because anything that you multiply by 0 will give you 0, and never 2. That means that y doesn't have an answer. So y is nothing. Not 0, but nothing, meaning that there is no possible number that you can plug in for y to make this statement true. The way you were probably asked to memorize this is that when you divide by 0, the answer is undefined. That is what undefined means, that there is no number with a definition that when you multiply by 0 gets you 2, or any non-zero answer. So there is no such number, and we usually say undefined. So make sure that you don't just memorize that division by 0 is not allowed. Think about why it's not allowed. This last case is one that you're not likely to encounter until you're in a calculus class. But still, it's interesting. Because when we establish rules, we don't often think about the exceptions. So if I ask you, what's 0 divided by 0? Let's think about some options. In the second example on this screen, we've seen that when you divide 0 by something, you get 0. But in the third example, we saw that if we divide something by 0, it's undefined. So which is it? Is the answer 0, or is it undefined? Or wait, do you remember your grade school teacher telling you that when you divide any number by itself, the answer is 1. So is 0 over 0 1? Or is it 0? Or is it undefined? Or is it pi? It seems difficult to come up with an answer based strictly on rules we've been taught to memorize. So let's use the same technique we used for the first 3 examples. Let's suppose that the answer to this we don't know, so let's call it n. Then the answer n multiplied by 0 should give us 0 back. Now think about that. What could I multiply by 0 to get 0? Well, anything. I like the letter n here because we can misspell it and write that the result of this is anything. This idea seems pretty useless when dealing with basic daily arithmetic, but when you get to calculus, there are situations where you try to evaluate functions at certain x values and you get 0 over 0, and then your job is to interpret what that means. In a different video, we can talk more about the calculus interpretation of it. But in those situations, we call 0 over 0 an indeterminate form, because the answer to that problem has not yet been determined. The answer could be 5, it could be 0, it could be 1, it could be pi, it could be any one of many things, and it could still be undefined. But that's what you have to look forward to when you study calculus. I hope to see you there. I hope you enjoyed this video. See you next time.